You're now listening to Sound Talent Media. Check out more shows at soundtalentmedia.com.
This episode is brought to you by the new true crime docuseries American Nightmare, only on Netflix. In 2015, the Vallejo, California Police Department received a strange phone call about a kidnapping. But when the truth is stranger than fiction, you won't know who to trust or what is real. A fast-paced true crime thriller with cliffhangers at every turn. Watch American Nightmare now, only on Netflix.
Keep your table sounding like this with Cheerios Oat Crunch. It's breakfast bliss that the whole family can enjoy, with energy from whole grains to help keep you going, along with 4 unique flavors: cinnamon, berry, almond, and oats and honey. So next breakfast, remember, a little crunch goes a long way. Learn more and shop for Cheerios Oat Crunch at Cheerios.com. 24 grams to 30 grams whole grain per serving, at least 48 grams recommended daily.
This episode is brought to you by Tic Tac. Minty, refreshing, classic. And it's not just the Tic Tac mints. It's the new track by Kenise with beats that'll leave you feeling as refreshed as a Tic Tac and a vibe that'll take you on a ride through 100 layers of flavor. Does it get any fresher than this?
Tic Tac, enjoy the bright side. That 100-layer joyride. Pop one, let's paint the town. Freshman flavors all around. Take a ride on a Tic Tac.
Pick up a pack of Tic Tac mints today.
The friendship is sharing deal.
Because I want one of your McNuggets.
And I need some of your Quarter Pounders.
There's a deal for everyone at McDonald's. Get one favorite like 10-piece chicken McNuggets, a Quarter Pounder, or a Big Mac, and get another for just $1. Price and participation may vary. Valid for item of equal or lesser value.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the podcast. I am very, very, very excited to have you with me. And if this is your first time, thank you. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for checking it out. I really appreciate you coming along. This one kind of happened at the last minute. I realized a few days before recording, I was like, I really should record an episode with my dude, Richard Oliver. Richard Oliver, you may be aware, is now another permanent co-host on Chasing Tone. I do Chasing Tone every week with Brian Wampler, and I have for years at this point, almost as long as I've been doing this podcast. And Richard joined us about 6 months ago, and he added a really nice dynamic to the podcast. He really helped mix it up just by way of his personality, and having him with Brian and I on that show has been a real game changer. So if you haven't listened to Chasing Tone in quite some time, maybe slide over there and give it a listen, because it's changed significantly from the days when it was just Brian and myself. Well, it's changed about 3 times now. This is like the 3rd iteration. There was the original with Max and Travis, which I loved. There were the many, many years where it was just Brian and myself. And now we have Richard, and we've got a whole different vibe going on. Well, not a whole different vibe. It's still the same, horsing around. But now we have a snarky British fellow on there with us as well. And it's been really, really, really fun. So I wanted to bring him on this show so I could have a one-on-one conversation with him and get to know his backstory a little bit better, because even though we've been talking weekly or better for 6 months, there were still things I didn't really know about him, and I thought it would be a good opportunity to get to know him better. And yeah, he's a great dude. So please go check out the latest edition of the Chasing Tone podcast if you have not. I've been doing that for years, and I really enjoy it. And now I enjoy it more than ever, really, really, truly. So let's get to know Richard a little bit better. This is a lot of fun. I think you'll enjoy this. Let's hop right into it. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Tone Mob Podcast, the show about guitar stuff occasionally, sometimes. I'm your host, Blake Weiland, and with me today I have somebody I talk to every single week over on the Chasing Tone podcast, but have never really sat down and broke it down on the microphone on an individual basis. Mr. Richard Oliver, how you doing?
I'm good. How you doing, Blake?
Dude, things are kind of insane, but as far as work goes, things are going pretty well, so I can't complain.
Insanity is never a good thing to hear about, to be fair, but especially in work. But if it's I can't really comment on that. I've had such an insane day, so I'm sort of feeling it too.
Yeah, I got you. Well, I wanted to get you on the podcast because I'll break it down from my perspective first, and then we can get into this a little heavier. But
because I'm wonderful.
You are wonderful.
Thank you.
I enjoy having you over on Chasing Tone. For the listeners of this podcast, some of you listened to this and not Chasing Tone, and vice versa. But I've done the Chasing Tone podcast with Brian Wampler for like 5 years or so, somewhere in that ballpark. And for most of that time, it was just Brian and myself. And then, how many months ago now, Richard? 6 months ago, probably, you started joining us?
I was about to say 5 minutes ago, it seems, but I think it was at the beginning of this year. So I think we started our first one just before Christmas, actually. So, wow, hasn't 2021 flown past? But yeah, I think 6-7 months we've been doing it together now, dude.
Yeah, and I felt like it injected some new life into the conversation, and the listeners seem to agree. And it's, I was like, I haven't had him on Tone Mob just to kind of chop it up on an individual basis. I know some of your stories. I know some of how you've gotten to the place where you are, but
I apologize in advance.
I don't know the day one stuff, really, You've made some references to things on Chasing Tone, but, like, when did you actually start playing guitar and, like, what, from the 30,000-mile view, like, how did you end up working with Brian and doing all the things that you're doing now in your very beautiful High-Watt t-shirt?
I mean, the whole Brian thing, and of course, this is the first time we've recorded a podcast without him, so can we say bad things about him? Is that all right?
Of course. Yes.
No, I'm
absolutely.
joking. He's a terrible taskmaster. He works me so hard. No, so I started playing guitar when I was 15, which is 30-something years ago, and I took lessons off a friend of mine called Stuart Anderson, I believe, who had this crazy Gibson aluminium neck tuning fork double cut guitar that I loved, and he was a whiz. He was in a band, I think they were called Urban Surfing, and they covered Johnny Be Good and Purple Haze and all the sort of classics, and I was like, I want that. That's what I want. So I chatted to him, and he's like, yeah, I can teach you, dude. So I went out and bought a Marlin Sidewinder guitar, which was about £50 back in 89, I think this is. It's a Strat clone, distributed from a company in Wales, so I already loved it. It was in like Hank Marvin red, so it was a bit garish. The pick guard was so warped, the pickups kind of moved. It was not a quality piece. I think I got a Friday guitar because mine was not good, but I learnt my chops at it. But again, he taught me secondhand from what he was learning. I learned one pattern on the scales, the intros to Johnny Be Good and Purple Haze, because he played them in his band. And then I thought I was good enough to learn on my own because I had the arrogance of youth behind me. So yeah, I went off with my little 10-watt Squire amp and started working my way through. I was really into the Doors at the time for whatever reason, so working my way through Doors tab, because of course they're known as a great guitar band, right?
Oh yes, they're a wonderful band.
I mean,
my favorite.
Probably the least guitar-y guitar band there is, and yeah, learnt Stairway to Heaven so that I could annoy people. A couple of songs, and then I thought I was a genius, so I started teaching other people how to play the guitar the Richard Oliver way. I think I mentioned this on the Chasing Tone podcast. If the parents of the two girls who I did teach guitar to or listen to, I will give you a refund. So, and then as I kind of got a little bit older, sort of 16, 17, I found my way to drums, which had always been like my first love musically. As a kid, I always used to bash sticks and whatnot. So I kind of gave up the guitar and started playing the drums. And thought that was going to be my future. And then sort of went to university where I couldn't take either guitar or drums. So I ended up making synth music with an old Commodore Amiga computer, and just sort of fell into the whole EDM thing, and literally did not pick up a guitar for about 6 or 7 years after that, I think. And it was only when I finished university, done all the going out clubbing nonsense, that I was like, I miss the guitar. And I went and bought a Epiphone, funnily enough, SG, and hated it. And then, yeah, basically carried on trying to learn myself for a good 25 years before 5 years ago going, you know what, I would really benefit from real lessons. So six years ago, I started to take the guitar a bit more seriously. 5 years ago, started my lessons. And then I'd say about 3 years ago, I decided that I was bored of my Line 6 Pod XT, and I would get back into tube amps and effects, because I sold it all in about 2003. I'd built a little studio, so I missed that bit out. I built a little studio for myself in about 2000, and it consisted of a couple of Marshall amps, a Vox amp, I think, for the bass, and a drum kit, all acoustically mic'd, all being recorded by a Tascam 24-track slidery box onto CD. It burnt onto CD. I was like, how cool is this? So
I remember
that's how I learned.
Had a Yamaha one like that.
Right, and they're really, really good. I was talking to someone about this yesterday. There's no better way to learn how to mix than with like a 16 or 24 track Porter Studio, because you're limited. And when you're limited and you don't have that palette of, I could put reverb here times 4 channels, you become creative, and you learn that actually there's so much you can do just by mixing. So that's kind of where that little funk track I played you a few weeks ago, that was all recorded on the Porter Studio, all with mics in front of amps, so fully analog. But I then thought, yeah, I'm going nowhere with this. We had to move house, and I was like, I'm not going to have a big studio. So I decided to go fully modeling and DAW, and that's when I got into Pro Tools properly. But I also, when I went to the dark side and got rid of my Marshall amp and my 1960 something fuzz face, I had a big muff, I had old Marshall Governor, sold them all for money that would make people weep today, and just plugged into that Line 6 for about 15 years.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was the dark time for me, guitar wise. Again, I was learning myself. So I don't know whether you remember or whether you ever used it, but Line 6 started off with their own like teaching thing, where I forget what it was called. It was part of the guitar port, but essentially it was backing tracks, and tab would play in a little window in front of you. And that was absolutely brilliant. So I learned like 5 or 6 tracks off that. And again, had graduated in my mind to absolute genius levels of playing. I was terrible. And I was loving it. And then suddenly they discontinued the software. None of my backing tracks worked. I think they ran into licensing issues. And I was like, that was the best thing ever. So again, back into the wilderness. And then one year I found an old Laney, I think it's 15 watt tube amp, just with a 10-inch speaker, and plugged it in and played my Les Paul through it. And I was like, I have missed this so much. And that's when the buying of tube amps and pedals recommenced. Oh, yes. So I went into my local guitar shop. I started looking for a Rat pedal, and they pointed me at one of Brian's pedals, the Sovereign. And I was like, this doesn't sound like a Rat, but I love it. And the guy in the shop was literally saying, yeah, this is a really transparent tone. And even then I was like, what does that even mean? But I took the pedal, took it home, and then, you know, as you do these days, I looked up the company on the internet, found the Tone Group, and then I reached out to Jason, who was, as far as I knew back then, running all of their marketing. I noticed he was based in Honiton, which is not a million miles away from where I'm like, dude, how does someone from the middle of nowhere in England end up, being the designer for a multinational musical pedal company? It's awesome. So we started chatting, and I just kept firing ideas at him. And he was like, oh, you should probably talk to Brian. So with resignation in his voice, he kind of hooked us up. And me and Brian just kind of hit it off. Just straight away, I was sort of saying, oh, we could try this. And by that time, I'd designed a few pedals with Jason, and I was kind of hooked. I was like, I love this. This is like, I remember as a kid looking in the shop at all of those colourful Boss and Digitech pedals, and now I've got a chance to like play and draw on them. So I did a lot of work with Jason, and then he left, and Brian was like, do you want to do it? I was like, yes, I do. So yeah, that's kind of how it all happened. And it was just by sheer luck and chance that I ended up doing this. I had no plan to do it.
Yeah, and it's so funny.
I did that all without breathing, I think.
You did. You didn't take one breath that whole time. I'm very impressed.
One breath.
The lung capacity is astounding.
Considering the lifestyle I've had, I would say so, yeah.
So you came on the Chasing Tone. When you came on, how did Brian spin it to you? Did he spin it as like, why don't you come on forever? Or was he just like, hey, let's do that? Like, what did he say to you to make you want to give that a try? Because it seems way out of your wheelhouse, but naturally you're actually pretty good at it.
Totally.
So.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind. I mean, totally out of my wheelhouse. I've done corporate presentations in front of groups of suits for many years, but I've always really hated my voice. And if you think my speaking voice is bad, boy, my singing voice is terrible. But he was in a little bit of a kind of he was not really enjoying everything he was doing work-wise. He had a lot of pressure on, and he was sort of saying, oh, I've got to do this and I don't know how to do that. And I was like, well, let me help you. And so I started helping with more and more, and then the podcast became something he found himself thinking about, and he's like, oh, I don't know what I want to do with the podcast now. And I was like, well, why don't we just see what happens if you get more people on it, like maybe as guests? And he's like, no, that doesn't work. That's what Blake does. I want to do it differently. And I was like, well, maybe I could come on and just add a different voice, because what was really like apparent is he kept forgetting to say the things he meant to say about marketing our products. I'd be like, on next week's podcast, make sure you drop this hint, please, Bri, because this is going to be a fantastic. And he kept forgetting. So I was like, right, if you keep forgetting, then I'm going to just have to come on and drop those massive clanging hints myself. And it wasn't like a big plan. It wasn't like, yeah, we need to do this, that. It's like, yeah, let's just try it and see what happens. Because Brian, that's kind of, he's very open-minded. He was kind of like, let's come on, let's see what happens. And I think I made you both laugh. I think that's how we ended up where we are.
Yeah, and it was one of those things, like I kind of knew immediately, like this is going to work well, but what wasn't quite as apparent right away was like how good the chemistry was going to develop. It really, as we've done more and more, we've gotten very comfortable with flinging certain insults at each other in a very fun way that we don't really mean, but I think it adds an element to the show that wasn't really there before. I mean, I'd make fun of Brian for being old, but that got old after a while. There's only so many old man jokes you can make.
I mean, he's only a year older than me, but I still like to make those old man jokes at him because I can get away with it. And I think as well, I disarm him by being British. I think just by calling him insert whatever swear word you want here in a British accent disarms it. It's like, he's just British. He doesn't really mean that 4-letter word he just said at me. So and I mean, I worried a lot about the podcast because I said it was not my wheelhouse, as you mentioned, but I felt we did all really just kind of get on and make each other laugh. And I think that's a formula for fun.
That was the first time I'd ever talked to you, was on that first podcast. I'd never talked to you before then. Isn't that kind of nuts?
I mean, I do now looking back. It's kind of crazy. And I guess we probably swapped a few messages online, but
yeah. We'd talked on the Facebook groups and stuff, but we'd never actually spoken before we recorded that first episode. And so I didn't know what you sounded like. I didn't know anything really about you other than you worked with Brian. And it's kind of a strange way to meet somebody. You know, it's like, hey, do you want to come on a podcast and basically have an introduction to someone in front of, 6,000 people or whatever? Because that's really what happened. It doesn't feel like it because it's just you and I on a call. But even right now, digging into this, it's kind of strange to think about how many people are actually going to hear these things. And I don't know if these conversations would be as fun if they were all sitting here. I think we'd be like, there. Look at all those eyeballs. I
wouldn't feel as brave about some of the things. Yeah, you're right. It was a complete baptism of fire, and I think in those situations, anybody with half a brain either sinks or swims straight away. So luckily, I think we all kind of swam with it. It was like, yep, let's just take the piss out of each other now. That's how things are going to be from now on. But again, I think it's funny because we did the Venn diagram of musical tastes and realised that it was probably just NWA that we all agreed on. But we've all got differing musical tastes, yet we all like really good music, and there are vectors that we're drawn to. So I think that helps. We all talk about different influences, which keeps it fresh for me anyway.
I think you and I have a lot more overlap than Brian and I do. Well, that's not necessarily true because Brian and I have this
other than Brad, but
I was just gonna say Brian and I have the country overlap pretty firmly, especially the '90s stuff. But you and I like a lot more weird stuff than Brian does, and I'm not just talking about Pink Floyd for all the.
No, I mean Brian doesn't really like anything weird. I think that's fair to say.
That's pretty fair to say.
He's not a fan of. Yeah, he's not a fan of. Whereas I've got a pretty broad taste because of, I guess, how I sort of hung around with different groups of people in my life. And yeah, I'm very open-minded. We definitely have got more musically in common than me and Bri, but I don't think necessarily that makes the conversation more difficult when he's involved. I think it adds a bit of humor to it. I love it.
Yeah, no, I actually I think it's a good thing. It's just an interesting observation. I mean, other than us being like three dads, like we do have, we're about as diverse as you can
in there
get.
Somewhere.
Yeah, three dads, three dads and an elephant. I don't know, but like we do have, we are about as different as that can get in our, older white demographic, I guess. Like we're just kind of weird people.
I mean, obviously, even from just that kind of viewpoint, I've obviously had a different upbringing from probably quite a lot of English people, as I've said on Chasing Tone. My mum's Indian, so I've always had a very multicultural upbringing and have just learnt to accept everybody and everything without judging, which is how everyone should be, of course. But it's given me a different eye on the world, whereas you guys have been brought up in complete redneck country. No, in a slightly different way, where you're all hillbillies. No,
yes,
where at least, yeah. No, but you know what I'm saying. So we've got a totally different view of culture, a totally different view of the world, but we all agree on every sort of thing. That's the weird thing. Even though we've had different upbringings, we have very similar views on things. Like when someone starts ragging on, I'm going to just say Joe Bonamassa because it's a common topic, we're all like, yeah, but he's a fantastic guitarist and people are just being jealous. None of us really like him, but we just have that common thread of common sense, I guess.
I think I would like Joe. I don't know. I've never gotten to meet him. I think I would like hanging out with him. I'm just, I'm not much of a bluesman, so it's not that and it's not even that I don't like blues. I do. It's just not in my wheelhouse of playing, and not my main. Well, I guess if you really dive into it, everything comes from the blues, but like it's not my main go-to source of inspiration the way it is for other people. So yeah, it's
right. And
the Bonamassa topic is oddly divisive amongst guitar players. I will say that. It's strange.
I don't get it because he's not my cup of tea. He is very talented. I love the blues, but I've heard a load of his songs and none of them were offensive to me, but none of them just hit home. Doesn't mean I can't absolutely, utterly respect him as a very good musician who's worked his socks off to get where he is and can produce music and has a right to have as many opinions as he wants because he is at the top of his profession. And I'm nowhere near that in terms of my guitar chops. Yeah, a lot of people do like to pull him apart for no apparent reason.
I will say you have actually paid him the highest compliment that I think anyone could pay a musician, and you purchased his back scratcher. I don't feel like I don't feel like you can pay a higher compliment.
I mean, I'm quite a tall guy, and I sometimes get an itchy back. So I have been known to use things like my steel rule, which can slice through flesh, my wife's pasta fork, or just simply the back of a door frame. So I was actually in the market for a back scratcher. I'm not going to lie. And when I saw, I think it's a 66 Jazzmaster in surf green back scratcher, I was like, what's not to love about that? Now,
that's right.
It's cost me as much in shipping as the thing cost itself. That's how much I wanted that back scratcher. But
you sent the message saying,
I can't wait.
Just try to talk me out of this. And I'm like, there's no way I'm going to talk you out of that. You have to buy that. Of course you have to buy that.
I did. Yep. It looks really cool. I hope it looks as good as the photo. I kind of regret not getting the Flying V one, because that's probably better ergonomically to hold. But I love surf green. So I'm going to go with my decision, and I'll give you a full review when we get it on the Chasing Tone.
Yes, that'll be marvelous. I'm tempted. I'm not going to lie. We were kind of poking fun about it, but I'm tempted by the guitar watering can. Now, the more I look at it, the more I'm like, it's so silly. I would love for my neighbors just to see me using that, and I'm like, oh, there's Blake, and oh, he really is in the guitar business, isn't he? Even his watering can is shaped like a guitar.
You're going to have to send me your address because I'm going to buy you that for a Christmas gift. 100%. If they're still being sold at Christmas, I'm sending you a Joe B guitar-shaped watering can.
Oh, man, I love it. I'm a fan of the salt shakers, too. It's great stuff. It's wonderful. What was it? I forget what the salt shakers were now. It wasn't the Marshall stack.
I think they were also Flying Vs.
Were they flying? They were Flying Vs, that's right.
They were Flying Vs. I just love the idea of an entire kitsch house made in Joe Bonamassa's name with everything a really tacky Joe Bonamassa ornament. That would really appeal to my sense of humor, I think.
I feel like that has to exist. That has to exist, right? There's no way that there's not somebody out there that doesn't have almost everything he's produced. It's just my theory.
I mean, you get people with guitar-shaped swimming pools, so they go that far. Why not? And they must sell at least one of everything. So you're right. Somebody somewhere must just be an insane Joe Bonamassa collector and have all 300 of his bobbleheads and ashtrays and roach clips and bandanas and whatever else.
Mm-hmm. Watering cans. Of course.
It's going to be like some octogenarian right in the middle of the country who just thinks he's a lovely, swell young boy and buys everything because they're loaded because they made all their money in the era of Prohibition when it was easy to make money.
just running moonshine the entire time, like the Kennedys. That's what people don't know that about the Kennedys.
Hot take.
Yeah, it's not a hot take. It's a fact.
Gonna go. Well, yeah, I'm not very big on my American history, I'm afraid. So I'm just assuming that you are actually saying something that not everyone knew. But I don't know whether this is dangerous, but I am going to go off very quickly and say I've been listening to a side shoot of the last podcast, which was all about Shelley Miscavige, the wife of David Miscavige, the leader of the Church of Scientology, who has gone missing for many, many years. But when the police have inquired, a number of Scientologists have said, no, she's fine. Here she is. Here's a letter from her. So there have been contacts, but nobody has actually seen her. And there's a 3-podcast series that I'm halfway through, just like examining how women got treated in Scientology in the early days and how she got where she is and actually where is she. I mean, how is that allowed to happen? That be called a church, that make as much money as it does, and just basically write its own laws. Very, very weird. I hope I'm not offending anybody by saying that, but it definitely makes probably
I don't think there's a big overlap
I don't know whether
with
your
my listeners in
is
Scientology. I'm pretty sure that's not the case. Yeah, I don't think that's
good.
I mean,
the next thing I want to talk about is Nexium.
Don't talk about that. I got a lot of Nexium listeners. No, I don't have any Nexium listeners that I'm aware of. And if you are a part of Nexium and you're listening to this, just turn it off. I don't want you to be here. Richard and I have an overlap of our interest in a podcast called Last Podcast on the Left, which is one of the biggest podcasts on the planet, but they examine some really, really, really messed up stuff. And I think it speaks to our messed up personalities a little bit. I try to fill in people. I was just going to say, I try to fill in the gaps for people because it's kind of surprising, really, how many people listen to Chasing Tone and not Tone Mob.
I know, and I apologize. I just realized that.
And vice versa. Yeah.
I just realized that I'm thinking that we're chasing Tone. We're not. We're chasing Tone Mobs.
Yes. And we're in the same position as we would normally be when we were doing the Chasing Tone. So
literally, I was just drifting off into random waffle in Chasing Tone mode. So, well, correct. But I've always had a fascination with the paranormal, and cults definitely fall into that. They're not quite paranormal, but the ability of one man, especially L. Ron Hubbard, to convince hundreds of thousands, millions, don't know, of people that aliens came to the planet in DC-8 planes and have inhabited you all, and you must all wear sailors' uniforms from the 1950s. That's just and give all of your money to the church, because churches are tax exempt. Cults are not. Just,
Yeah, I don't understand it, but it is a thing that has happened for all of human history. Not that specifically, but there's always somebody taking advantage of people in some way, and the people. I feel like a lot of these people are just lost and looking for answers, and they find it in these people who, if you say something loudly enough and convincingly enough, somebody's going to believe you at some point. There are millions of people in this world, and you only need a tiny fraction of a percentage of them to follow you, and then wham bam, you got yourself a cult. So I think Richard's starting something about the House of Petals, and you can follow him over there on.
I was just about to say, Blake, surely we could make some sort of pizza-based cult. Surely if we did the cult of the mozzarella, something along those lines, who doesn't love pizza? Everybody in your group definitely loves pizza.
Oh man, pizza is life. Pizza is what it's all about. You know, we all
I made
came
my
from
own
pizza
last week.
You did?
What? This is news.
Yeah, we all came from pizza. Yeah.
Yes.
You know, back in the day,
I made an awesome
the giant pizza boss cooked us, and we're all just dough that has been formed into human. I don't know what I'm saying. I'm not any good at this.
This supports my theory that the Earth is disc-shaped and flat and not actually spherical, Blake. I like it. The Earth is actually just a giant flat pizza.
Yes, of course. It just makes sense. Mm-hmm.
We can build a cult around this. We can definitely build a cult around this.
I'm gonna need you to like everyone's going to need to follow you, and you got to wear one of those weird hats like a pizza chef makes. You know, you see the guy on the box like carrying the pizza with his chef's hat. That'll be the uniform, I think.
That would be so cool. I would grow the moustache especially.
Oh yeah. You got to get it way out there, and you got to curl it upwards. You know, you're gonna have to get a lot of wax involved, I think.
Waxing is not going to be an issue. I think just the actual steady hair growth at my age is going to be a difficult part. But I'm game. If there's a cult, if we can brainwash people, if we can just create some form of pyramid scheme where we make money by spouting off, then I'm all game for that. That sounds like that's right up my street.
So we talked about it, I think, briefly on Chasing Tone. Maybe our conversations get very jumbled because we talk on Chasing Tone, we talk on the Chasing Tone Patreon, and then we also talk off the air. And so sometimes I can't remember what was said where. But I know on this podcast I've never gotten the opportunity to talk about the weird business cult that tried to suck me in here like 3 or 4 years ago. Did we talk about that on Chasing Tone?
Right.
I can't remember.
We touched on it. We didn't go into details, but speak on, Brother Blake.
Well, it was weird, let me tell you. And I did figure out like what it was. But you know, I ran into this guy at the store, and I'd had a particularly good day for whatever reason. And he said, "Hey, how's it going?" And I'm like, "Oh, actually, it's going really good." "Oh, what's your name?" "I'm Michael so and so, and I'm Blake, blah blah." And then, of course, the next thing is, "What do you do?" And I explained to him, like, "Yeah, I do this podcast. You know, I am a partner in the string company and blah, 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 blah." Excuse me. And he's like, "Oh, that sounds really interesting. You know, you sound like the type of guy that my mentors would like to meet." And I was like, "Oh, okay, this is kind of weird, but..."
Gullible.
"Sure." "What's that? What's that?"
Gullible.
I didn't hear it. And I was like, "Oh, okay, sure." So we met up and we had coffee, and then I still couldn't get any answers out of him. And now I'm just like, okay, I think this is nonsense. Like, I'm sure this is a pyramid scheme, but I would like to know more, just because I want to know more.
Because you mentioned money.
Well, mostly because I wasn't buying it. You know, I wasn't buying it at all, but I wanted to know what the angle was. I was kind of fascinated by it. Like, what is the angle here? So I went to coffee with him again. He invited me to one of their meetings, and I was like, okay, I guess I'll go to this meeting, and there I shall receive the answers as to what this is. And I go to the meeting, and it's just person after person. So first of all, I thought it was going to be like at a meeting place. It was just in some house in Vancouver, Washington. I was like, okay. Everyone's there in like suits. Everyone's there in suits. I'm there in like a flannel and just like my trucker hat and just like, "Hello, everyone. I am from the woods. What's going on?" And there's person after person gets up and is just gushing about this guy. I can't remember his name. We'll call him David. I don't think that's it, but we'll call him David. "Oh, David and his wife are so wonderful."
That's a good cult leader name.
Yeah, well, yeah, then, now that you mention it, there's been a few of those. There's Branch Davidians. There's all kinds of, yeah, all right.
David Miscavige of Scientology. It's all there.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. So, person after person going up and then like explaining like how wonderful all this is. and how wonderful this David guy is and how wonderful his wife is and how it's completely changed their life. And I'm like, oh boy, these people are sipping some Kool-Aid. Like, what is going on here? And then David himself his wife gets up, gushes about her husband and how wonderful it is and blah, 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 blah. No details are being given at this point. This David fella gets up, and he's about the same age as me, and he's strutting his stuff and talking about how brilliant he is and how he, he told his story about how he used to be an alcoholic and he pulled himself together, and now he's, this brilliant business leader and blah, 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 blah. And I could go to sleep and still make $150,000 a year or whatever it was. And all this nonsense. And so we get done with the whole thing, and I'm just more confused than ever, because I'm going, I still don't know what any of this is. How are you making your money? How are you none of this makes any sense. And the guy pulls me aside, kind of singles me out. Everyone else seemed to know each other. I didn't know anybody there. And so he kind of pulls me aside. So what'd you think of that? I was like, well, I'm still I get the motivational stuff you were saying, but I still don't understand what any of this is about. Well, why don't you come back to another meeting we're going to have next week? And I'm just like, I have invested entirely too much time in this, and this feels like a cult. I am just going to leave. And it was 11 o'clock at night at this point. I left, went home, explained the whole thing to my wife, who promptly forgot about it. And then I kind of forgot about it myself until fast forward to a few months ago. I saw somebody in a personal finance group or something talking about a very similar situation. And this guy just happened to be local to me. He's like, oh, that sounds like World Dream Builders. I was like, message me, explain to me what this World Dream Builders thing is. And he explained it's an Amway thing. Are you familiar with Amway?
Yeah, one of my cousins was involved with that, I think.
Yeah, so it's just a more extreme. I don't know the details. It's a more extreme, culty version of it's an offshoot of Amway, or a subsidy, or I don't really know how it works. Somehow they're affiliated. Basically, you end up hawking supplements and various Amway products. That's the whole thing. And the only way you really make money is by getting people under you. And, and they have all this training for you to go and do exactly what that guy did to me. Find people at stores who, fit certain criteria and get them to come to these things. And I'm sitting there going, this is all just complete nonsense. But I can see how other people might get sucked into it. But it was very culty. It was weirdly culty. And that just made me, I'm out of here. Why are they worshiping this man? I am gone. This is so weird. But yeah, that's long, weird story.
I worked with a guy who was Svengali-like in his ability to kind of bring people on board and keep them loyal. And he was very, very rich, and he made quite a lot of people relatively well off. And I remember saying to him about something being a pyramid scheme and kind of laughing about it. And he turned around in all seriousness. He's like, pyramid schemes are brilliant as long as you know when to get off. And it's true. There is clearly a level that works for somebody in pyramid schemes. I can't do it in the same way. I look at TV mediums, psychics, whatever, like John Edward. And who's that young kid who does it in Hollywood? I forget his name. And essentially, they haven't got psychic powers. They're basically preying on people who, are suffering from grief, and they're making a fortune out of it. Now, I like money, but I could not hawk myself in something that I didn't agree with ethically in that way, no matter how much money was involved, and I kind of see people in pyramid schemes and TV psychics and people selling quack remedies. I tar them all with the same, you've got to go to sleep at night knowing that you are basically just a massive fraud. I couldn't do that. That's not me at all.
No.
But
I just heard
on
about
the subject of that,
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I'd like to sell you my new magic miracle restorative cure, the all-new Wampler tonic. Drinking it will make you very grouchy every Friday. It will make you a genius at building pedals, but you'll never, ever be able to name another pedal again.
That's right. It will be called the Wampstortion, Volume 400.
Why is naming pedals the most difficult job? It really is. But anyway, I don't want to go too much into that.
No, let's talk about that. We've both been involved in that process. Like we kind of do similar-ish things. Like you do more graphic work. I don't do any of that. But like as far as like conceptualizing and trying to come up with names and knob layouts and blah blah blah. We do some of the same things for different people.
100%. So for Wampler, essentially what I do, I take care of the social media, like you take care of a few brands' social media. We built the website, so I look after the website. But as well as designing the graphics for the pedals, I also work with the team on what the pedals are what functionality they've got, what they're gonna sound like, what the layout is, whether we're going to add this or that. Then I design them. Then I design the boxes and the manuals for them, and write the copy for them and upload them to the website. So other than manufacturing, we've got a kind of small team of engineering and marketing. We cover everything other than manufacturing, in a pretty efficient way, I'd say. So I do tend to get my hands involved in a lot of things. Also, as well as Wampler, obviously, I've done work with Soldano, Synergy, Tone King, Matthews, and Morgan, because at various points they've all been associated. Some aren't now, and so it's been brilliant. I've got to do lots of things, but the naming of pedals is my biggest bugbear, because I can do a graphic. If you tell me what the name is, I can figure out what the graphic is. If you tell me it's called the I don't know, let's just say it's called the trophy, then the gearbox. Well, yeah, my first design for the gearbox was, funnily enough, a gearbox, and everybody was like, what the hell is that? I was like, that's what a gearbox looks like. Look, shit, get rid of it, put something else there. So I put a big V8 block on, and everybody on social media is like, but that's not a gearbox. I'm like, I know. Gearboxes are not exciting to look at. They're metal cases with like 6 cogs in them. Come on. And cogs is so overplayed. I mean, we've done it ourselves on the Tumnus, where I built the new Tumnus is a exploding clock to represent basically time travel, because we had to get a bit obscure with what we were doing with that pedal because of the Disney thing. But yeah, I try not to avoid. I try to avoid using cogs and gears because everybody else uses it. So yeah, the gearbox was therefore not a gearbox. But gearboxes are connected to engines, and engines are good things. End of.
Yeah, it makes sense. I got it. I mean, I'm a mechanic, and I understood what you were going for, and I knew why a transmission would look stupid on it. It just wouldn't look good.
Right, and
engines look cooler.
Yeah, whilst obviously the play on gearbox was very much based on Andy Wood's love of, and actually we both have a shared love of cars, and the colour he wanted, that Lamborghini orange, which I kind of modified a bit because it was a bit too bright, so we went to a more of a sort of almost a BMW orange, and we try to get some of that stuff going on. But the other thing is, it's a little bit of a play on words, because it is literally a box full of all the gear you need to make an amazing tone. Plug it into an amp. I'm not doing my sales pitch here, but the idea is that's all you needed. Obviously, he likes to put his compressor in the middle, but on its own, add a bit of reverb, that pedal can do so much. That's also why it's called the gearbox, because it's a box full of the gear you need. But I think that was kind of lost. I think I was a bit
I didn't pick up on that one. I did not pick up on that.
No, well, I quite often have to explain some of my more subtle ideas.
It's always so funny, like, I did the Model 1 fuzz years and years ago with Solid Gold Effects. And the whole reason I called it the Model 1 fuzz was because of this difficulty with naming pedals. And I was like, and then the next limited pedal I do will be the Model 002. And it will just be easy just to keep continuing to do that. But none of the other collaborations I did followed that at all. They all ended up being more typical pedal names, the Typhon, the Demogorgon, like all this other stuff. You know, it just... I was like, so it's this random fuzz called the Model 001 with nothing following it. So,
it's a brave step to do, because we were going to do it. So we were going to release a number of, I have to be careful how I pitch this, mini pedals, and they were all going to be in a series, and they were all going to have a kind of name like that. But that didn't happen in the end. We went away from it largely because other companies did things similar to us, and it took the wind out of our sails and made us realize, well, we have to, pivot here slightly. So we ended up naming them all with individual names. But I love the Boss methodology. Just call everything the OD, insert number X here. Brilliant. That's saved so much marketing time. And Brian loves it too, because Brian hates thinking of creative naming, even though he's really good at it. You've just got to get him at the right time. But I'm all for function over form. I love the design of Boss pedals because they use a kind of retro 80s font, because they were coming out in the 80s. They just use big bright colors, no graphics, just the name of the pedal and the labels, and that is all you need. But obviously, we all have to do things differently, and we've got our own style, which is fairly well established. But we'll play around with it in the future for sure. We'll do some different things.
Mm-hmm. Has there been? So you kind of came into the gear side of things a little bit later in life, after working in a whole bunch of different industries. Has there been anything that has surprised you about working so heavily in the gear world versus other jobs that you've had?
That's a really good question. I have to, again, answer this carefully, because if I said, everyone in the gear industry is mad and disorganized, I mean, one, that is true, but it's also true of other industries. So I think the number one thing, and it's said time and time again, is the attitude between competition, because we are all competing for everybody's dollars. So have no doubt that Josh really is trying to sell more pedals than Brian, and Brian is trying to sell more pedals than Robert, and yada yada. But they've all figured out that to do that successfully, they should just work together and kind of encourage each other. And it's built this whole environment of friendly competition, which I think is way ahead of a lot of other industries. In the sort of guerrilla marketing books, which I used to have to read when I was, a marketing director, they talk a huge amount about you should use your competition. You shouldn't be fearful of your competition, but you should reach out to your competition and see what you can learn, and perhaps even collaborate with them, because, there's more strength there. And a lot of businesses are stuck in the 90s way of, nope, I am the best and I'm doing it my way. But in the gear industry, in the music industry in general, there's a lot more, they've done it really well, but actually I appreciate that. Let me just have a chat and find out how they did it. And that absolutely is ahead of its time, I would say.
That's cool. Yeah, that was something that was really surprising to me too. It was always, when I was a mechanic at the Caterpillar dealer, it was always like, boo on the John Deere dealer, boo, like, and understand that, like, you're only going to have one tractor, most likely, where you'll have, 50 different pedals at some point. So that there's less of a threat to encouraging your competitors. But I think collaboration, especially for musicians, is so key. Because even if you're not collaborating with some huge artist, right? Say you're like trying to do a song together. That person very likely has people in their group or in their audience that you don't have, even if it's just one person. You know, it's the equivalent of playing, 250 gigs a year. There's people in every city who have never heard of you. And if you can collaborate with another artist on a track and get even one person from their audience to hop over to yours, because that's the thing, is nobody just listens to one song. Nobody just listens to one single artist and nobody else. If they hear somebody that they vibe with...
I was with you on one song, but single artist, no, I'm out now. I only listen to Pink Floyd, nothing else, ever.
Ever.
I'm joking,
nothing else matters.
I also listen to
Metallica?
Bowie. Yeah. No, that's Miley Cyrus.
Now stop it. You stop it right now. I mean, her version was
But you
good.
are correct.
I'm not going to sit here...
It's very true that the strength in small business is to exploit its ability to pivot quickly, and in an industry which is essentially lots of small businesses, and I don't mean tiny one-man bands, I mean businesses that aren't making 100 million a year, let's say, then there's so much room to do that, and there is, as you say, an ability to market to each other's customer base. And people who buy Josh's pedals may not buy Brian's, but may buy Robert's, but people who buy Robert's may buy Brian's, and vice versa, etc., etc. And I love that about it, because life's too short to be competing on a planet with limited resources. We should just be all making the best of what we got and enjoying it. There's my hippie speech over.
Well, I mean, that's, prime example is, why... why would Brian have been invited to go on Josh's massive YouTube show, And I'm sure we'll have Josh on Chasing Tone at some point, it's
right.
It's like, it just makes sense, it just inherently makes sense from a business perspective and from a, let's make this fun perspective. Let's not make it such a grind. Let's have a good time with it.
And that's the other thing. Even though, as you and I both work in the industry, any job that you do becomes a bit painful. So there are times when I'm like, oh, do I really have to plug in this distortion pedal, or do I really have to test out these delay algorithms for another hour? And it's work, so it doesn't seem like fun. Every now and then you've got to stop yourself and go, we're making products that are fun, and I need to enjoy them. And then when you do enjoy them, you're like, I'm so happy to be in this industry again. It just comes straight back to that every time. And I mean, my pedal board is absolutely chock full of products that I've helped build. And that's so satisfying to look down and see a pedal board that is 80%, mine and Brian's work. I'm like, wow, and everybody else, but it's just insane. It blows my mind, and I love it. But what I love the most is seeing my pedals on, or I talk about them as if I'm the main person who makes them. Clearly I'm not, but pedals I've designed or worked on people's pedal boards and them loving it. It gives me such a buzz, and I've never experienced that in any job. No matter how much money I've earned, no matter how many people have been subscribing to the businesses I've been in, nothing I've ever done has given me as much pleasure as seeing people play pedals I love and I've worked on and love them. It's fantastic, man.
Well, because you know what that feels like. When you have a pedal or a guitar or whatever that you love, it feels really good. And to know that you're helping somebody else have that same experience is extremely rewarding. Like, it's kind of hard to describe.
Yeah, it's what keeps us going, and it's why we all accept the fact that it doesn't pay as much as the insurance software industry did. That's the reality, because, I was working with clients who were raising hundreds of millions of pounds for floats and all sorts, whereas now I'm worried about, shall we sell this pedal for 229 or 239? It's a different scale, and obviously we sell a lot of pedals for that, but it's a different scale. But it's so much more rewarding in so many ways. It's fantastic. And I've met so many cool people, including you, Blake. I would not have met you without this. And you've helped me in other aspects of my life, which, that's what life's about, is making those connections. I remember when my tube went on my Soldano. First, I obviously spoke to someone who I know at Soldano, who I work with daily. He was like, I think it might be this. I then checked with Brian, who knows a little bit about amp design, and he was like, you should check with Dave Friedman. And I'm like, you reckon he'll be all right with that? He's like, yeah. So I text Dave Friedman. So I've suddenly got, one of the world's foremost experts on amp design troubleshooting what turned out to be a broken valve. But it's mind-blowing, and I love it. And, there have been times when I've had Zoom or Skype calls with, like, insanely famous guitarists, and they're just like me, because I talk to them and they're like, oh, cool, you've got a cool drum kit there, tell me about that. And then I start talking about, like, whatever. We're all just in it for the toys and the playing, I think, right?
Totally. Well, dude, we're approaching the end of the podcast. I've got a couple classic questions I need to ask you that I have not asked you, which is kind of weird. But before we do that, this is your chance to take the floor. You can, tell your great Aunt Martha that she's fantastic. You can plug your favorite burger joint. You can say whatever you want. If you have a message you want to get out to people, now is the time.
How long have I got?
As long as you want.
This is going to take a while.
Okay, let's do it.
I mean, so I will definitely say a couple of things. Firstly, check out some of the pedals that we are about to release, because I'm giving you the heads up now. These are some of the most exciting pedals I think Wampler have ever done, hands down. There's one on my board at the moment, and I'm literally looking at it with loving eyes. It's probably the next pedal that gets released, but I'm not sure. It's gonna kill. It's amazing. So definitely keep an eye on Wampler's releases. Also, anybody out there needs help with websites, I run a very small consultancy called Amplify Creative. We're not stupidly expensive. We're not the cheapest. We're not as cheap as going to Wix, that's for certain. But hit me up if you're looking for stuff like that. We're always onboarding clients. I don't have a great Aunt Martha, but I would definitely say lots of love to her if she was here. Go check out The Suicide Squad in your nearest cinema, because it has brought back my faith in the DC universe. I think that's probably the biggest endorsement I can give on that film. We went to see that last night, and I looked at my watch only once, and that's my benchmark on films. Like, even some of the better Marvel films are like 3 times I'm checking my watch, like, how long is this going on for? But The Suicide Squad, James Gunn nails it. I mean, if you like Guardians of the Galaxy, 100% you're going to love this film. So, go check that out. And, I think that's probably about it. I've plugged myself enough. Listen to the Chasing Tone podcast. Sign up to the Patreon so you can listen to more of the Chasing Tone podcast. Sign up to Blake's Patreon so that he gets more loyal listeners who might also come and listen to the Chasing Tone podcast. That's it, dude. That's my plugs done.
All right. I like it. Okay, here we go. First question, and this one will be fun to explore with you. What's your favorite Boss pedal?
Uh-oh. It's not going to win me any friends here, but for me, it was the OG. It was the pedal that introduced the concept of pedals to me. I'd never knew what a guitar pedal was until my friend who I referenced earlier showed me this, and it's the sound I first saw, and that is the Boss Turbo Distortion.
Oh, no, the Turbo Distortion's pretty cool, actually. I like that pedal.
The sound,
all right.
The sound of that for a 20-watt solid state amp was the sound I saw when I was first playing guitar. And when I rebought all my guitar gear in the early noughties, I did buy another one. I didn't like it very much, but it is, for me, my favorite Boss pedal.
All right, there you go. Okay, final question. This is the big one. We're really going to get into this. Richard, what is your favorite kind of pizza?
Whoa. It is a plain... Can I have 2 answers?
Sure.
Because I'll die if I don't give you at least one of these. My wife will literally take me outside and I'll never be seen again. So my number one favourite pizza is just a cheese and tomato pizza made at Gabby's in Flushing, Queens, New York. I was introduced to it by a cousin of mine. I don't know what they put in the mozzarella or the sauce, but it has trumped every other pizza I have ever eaten. So I know it's quite dull, but if anyone is anywhere near Queens in New York City, go check out Gabby's. I mean, it's quite a famous little pizza joint. Their pizza is literally the best in the world. And then the politically correct answer is any pizza that comes from Italy.
It's because Anna is of Italian descent, and you were trying to save your kneecaps.
My wife is half Italian. I mean, we ate some great pizza in Rome, but Gabby's wins.
Gabby's wins. Wow, that's a big statement. This is a guy that has been there. I have not yet been to Italy. I have been to New York, and the hype is real. I haven't been to Gabby's though. I got to fix that.
Oh, honestly, if you're ever anywhere near Queens, do it. And it looks like a nothing. You walk in, it's plastic furniture, a few pictures of some of the Sopranos on the wall, but the pizza was like, I think they must sprinkle crack cocaine in it. It's so good.
Oh man, Gabby's Pizza. There's a big plug for Gabby's. If any of the listeners text me, let me know if you've had Gabby's, because I'd love to hear your experience as well. Well, dude, thank you so much for hanging out. This was fun. I'm glad we did this.
You're very welcome, man.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, thank you, dude. I really enjoyed it. And hope I didn't come off as a complete dick like I normally do. Oh, wait, too late.
All right, everybody. For Richard, this is Blake. And as always, folks, good luck and good tones. All right, there you have it. There you have it. I hope you enjoyed that. And if you need more and you want to hear Richard and I talk about more guitar stuff, but also mostly our love for automobiles, slide over to Patreon and you can get extra episodes beamed to your ears every week. And they are a lot of fun. Additionally, I did get the thing I mentioned last week, the Apple subscription. I did get that set up. And so there will also be an additional episode. It's the same episode, whether you choose to do Apple or Patreon, but there is an additional chat with Richard and I available if you would like to hear more of us and help support the show. In the Apple subscription thing, I have not gotten all of the back episodes uploaded to that yet, so you're just going to be getting the current bonuses for now. I'm trying to figure out with Apple and their clunky back end how to upload them so they appear in the feed correctly, because as it sits right now, if I upload all 180 or whatever back episodes that I have, it would display them all at once in your feed, in your main feed, and it would screw up things for non-subscribing listeners, and I don't want to do that. But I'm figuring it out, and as new episodes are added, you will definitely be getting those. I'm figuring out how to get the back catalog for Apple subscribers up. So if that's your thing, all you have to do is go into your app. You'll see the Tone Mob podcast and it'll say subscribe. And all you got to do is hit that button, just like downloading an app from the App Store. Super, super easy. And then you will have those additional episodes as well. And it's the same price. So if all you're looking for is extra episodes and you're an Apple user, that's probably going to be easier for you. But if you want some more things and some other ways to support, head over to Patreon and check that out. But for the bonus content, it's the same. So never fear. Nobody's getting left out. So thank you all for your support. And if you can't do any of that right now, I totally understand. But please, 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 share this with somebody you care about. Share this with somebody you think might enjoy this rambling nonsense. And, you know, it might make their day brighter. And that would definitely make my day brighter if you could do that. Please, 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 please share this with somebody that you think might enjoy it. All right, everybody. I'll talk to you on the internet real soon. Bye-bye. One last thing before we totally sign off here. I just want to remind you that if you do any shopping at Stringjoy, that's Stringjoy guitar strings made in Nashville, that will help me out as well. As I've said for years, I'm heavily involved in that company, and I really do think they're making the best products on the market. So if you would like to try custom strings, go to tonemob.com/stringjoy and check them out today. I seriously love what the team down there is doing. I help them out with all kinds of things, and by you supporting them, you are also supporting me as well. And hey, you need some strings, so why not get some custom strings just for your guitar and playing style? Again, the link for that is tonemob.com/stringjoy, and that will take you right to their website, and you can do all your shopping through there, and that will help everyone involved out. So thank you very much. Talk to you next time. We are brought to you by the wonderful folks at Gun Street Wiring Shop. Yes, Gun Street Wiring Shop. I've talked about them before. I used to say based out of Bend, Oregon, but guess what? Sean moved to my neck of the woods. Sean's in Portland. Sean is awesome and has helped me with a bunch of stuff lately. And if you have wiring needs for your guitar, he can help you too. If you want to get weird with it, he can get weird. If you just need to spruce things up a little bit, there's your guy. He takes all the guesswork out of doing your guitar wiring, and he makes it simple, and his customer service is top-notch, and I can't say enough good things about Gun Street as a company. I really respect Sean and what he's all about, and the product is top-notch. I've got 3 different guitars that now have Gun Street harnesses in them, and I could not be happier. So go to gunstreetwiringshop.com and check them out.